W.B. Yeats's Second Coming presents a destructive image of apocalypse, the millenarian end of an old world. Whereas the Second Coming has been linked to a holy return of God's only Son, Yeats's Second Coming presents an image of the terrifying march of a sphinx. The poem depicts the inevitability of fate, where time and existence are woven into an endless cycle of violent destruction and rebirth. I argue that it isn't a nihilistic image of wasted physical human effort in the face of repeated extermination. Rather, it shows the capability of people to struggle spiritually against the endless turning gears of time. By instilling meaning into their doom through collective consciousness and the spiritus mundi, people give meaning to the fleeting smallness of human life across time and space. The opening stanza of the poem distinguishes the world as having been brought to the brink of apocalypse, of cataclysmic change, depicted as the turning in of existence on itself, like the coil of an immortal Ouroboros. The coming of the end of the world, as opposed to a destruction and annihilation by a higher being, is a subversion of things already existing. It is a twisting of morals being misplaced and of the natural order being disrupted through cyclical change as opposed to sudden destruction. It is perhaps a depiction of atavistic human tendencies to physical self destruction through conflicts and wars led by the best lacking all conviction, and the worst elements of human nature being full of passionate intensity. This reversal suggests that the Second Coming and the millenarian return is not brought about by higher powers, but by the fall of human beings themselves. The attribution of the adjectival widening emphasizes that this timescape is not perfectly reproductive in repetition. Instead, it is moving continually in an unsustainable outward motion of change. It suggests the irregularity and distortion of an original core, as suggested by the abstract center. The use of widening, particularly opposed to synonyms like lengthening or stretching, suggests an overbearing potential for collapse, like a black hole which eventually devours itself. It elucidates that events in history do not begin with catastrophes, but with slow degradation instead. Physical disorder and disarray are immediately apparent. The inability of the falcon to hear the falconer prevents the subversion of the natural order and a resistance of the natural world to humanity. It not only suggests that the domesticated bird is out of its master's direct command, but also the radical changing of the power dynamic between master and servant. The imagery and blank verse of the poem is reminiscent of Macbeth, where Macbeth's violent usurp of the throne leads to a reversal of natural order in Scotland, with a falcon towering in her pride of place, killed by the mousing owl. It suggests an ambitious bearing of violence in the subtext. The establishment of the falcon as the foremost object and the falconer as the acted upon subject of the line suggests that the power exerted by the first is on the latter, that the physical world once assumed to be tamed by humanity is now tamed by it. The natural state of power and hierarchy is reversed, and in poems such as Sailing to Byzantium, the physical young have left no country for the old. The litotic dismissal admitted by the oxymoron of the mere anarchy by the speaker after, however, alludes to a spiritually authoritative role over apocalypse and a confidence of human agency in the face of physical Armageddon. Thinking back to the circularity of the turning, the unleashing of anarchy fails not only to be shocking, but is actually underwhelming and patiently expected by the preacher like speaker who awaits this apocalypse as an underwhelming variant of a repeated past. Rather than victims in the face of anarchy, humans are active agents and spectators of their own demise instead of mere victims. They resist mentally through resistance, like sarcastic discourse, even when their physical forms fail to triumph against overwhelming nature and fate. The second stanza switches from that of a seemingly distant voice, placed into the hands of an uncertain, shaky narrator. The anaphora of the surely shows the speaker doubting themselves as they speak. They appear to reassure themselves that the oncoming of apocalypse is the impact of beneficial change, and by returning the discourse of the poem to metaphysicality as opposed to the abstract, and saying the revelation is at hand, attempts to put agency during crisis back into the hands of the people. The emphasis by Yeats of the speaker hallucinating a shape appear in the sands of the desert in the Spiritus Mundi is reminiscent of Shelley's Ozymandias and the sands that stretch far away. with the image of the ruins of the two great truncated legs representing the collapse of a civilization bygone, and the effigies of glory. Although such an image can illustrate ideas of downfall and degradation, with the poem seemingly slipping away with a semblance of the passage, it also empowers the resilience of people against time and suggests that the moments humanity constructs outlast themselves and their bastardized descendants. By leaving behind such effigies, humans escape the gyre of cyclicity into immortality through the accumulation of knowledge. The spiritus mundi, world spirit, refers to the universal consciousness of creative inspiration from which the image springs. It suggests a collective memory or trauma inherent in the creative mindscape, which allows humanity to recognize and remember across time, and also to pass on memory and knowledge about resistance in identifying this apocalypse beast. Humanity can thus retain knowledge over time with the widening of the Gaia, like the rings of a tree stump, which, although never meet, are integral to the entirety of the tree in existence, emphasizing how information can be passed on in this consciousness despite apparent inevitable reset. The shape which the speaker sees, with a lion body and head of a man, conjures up images of a sphinx, with a semiotic links to the timeless Egyptian desert as a cradle for human civilization, emphasizing that the second coming has always come, suggesting how humans can not only resist, but survive apocalypse repeatedly. The simile of the Sphinx's gaze being as blank and pitiless as the sun suggests a cosmic indifference that the matters and affairs of humanity are minute and meaningless in the face of greater powers, with the indifferent movement of the Sphinx, which seems to be making a slow, unflinching approach, unmarred by the indignant desert birds. The infantilizing image of the rocking cradle admonishes Apocalypse to a mere rock of the cradle, which emphasizes the power of the great beast compared to the physical efforts of humanity and nature, whose chaos is merely a seeming vibration of existence as opposed to a violent shake which rouses it to wake. While the speaker intends for a tone of neutrality, he almost reflexively inserts, and what rough, displaying an ambivalence towards the creature. Not only that it fails to meet standards, but linking to the speaker's earlier troubled sight, and suggesting an annoyance by the speaker of the situation. It again asserts human opinion and agency over change. Even though the speaker is aware of their end, like a surly old man, they still need to make derogatory remarks. The final brooding line of the great beast towards Bethlehem to be born draws connections to the birth of Christ. But his transformation from his human-like form into this animalistic sphinx suggests the distortion by centuries of misuse and appropriation. The "but now I know" beckons the insertion of the volta and an epiphany by the speaker of acquiring new knowledge, likely a unspoken realization of the coming's true nature, that it is instead a grotesque subversion rather than a holy one. While the beast has been seen by writers as depicting the irrational destructiveness of wars, it is also possible this creature is perhaps the embodiment of general human sin. That with the coming of Christ, a great human sin is also born to counterbalance. That, like opening Pandora's box, a great fury and power is unleashed onto the world, to the behest of all those involved. The use of the word slouches and come round at last, however, suggests the narrator's scorn of an almost reluctance by the beast in his journey. That he must keep walking despite his wishes, and that he perhaps carries an Atlassian burden of bringing about monumental change. The biased portrayal of the beast with the ending question mark once again superimposes the speaker's curiosity onto the end, and puts the authority of representation into humanity as opposed to the other way around, once again showing human resistance capability. Yeats' Second Coming's epic imagery and ambiguity lead to a disturbed picture of the end of time, of the fall of humanity, and of reluctance of the natural world's change. Whilst people succumb to fall by their own natures, the collective spirit of human ingenuity and belief, however, survives through the collected inspiration and the spires of the gyres of time and collected memory. While people may become twisted and the natures of the strong and weak reversed, they overcome the turn of the apocalyptic swirl and the slow marching of the beast in asserting human agency and opinion, maintaining the spirit of humanity in the new world.